What? Uh, Tell us something about your latest film.
Well, about my latest film, the Bengali title is Dekha. It's going to be released on the 16th of February in Calcutta and the suburbs. Well, I've really enjoyed making this film, a small budget Bengali film. Uh, the film is about, I would say, sight and sightlessness. And sight and sightlessness I use here as a metaphor. And this could be metaphor for many things related to our own lives and our position in our society and so on. I really don't know how to say about my film. Well, my latest feature film, Dekha, in Bengali, uh, is scheduled to release in February, in the mid-February. Uh, the film is, I would say, about sight and sightlessness. And I have used sight and sightlessness as a metaphor, uh, perhaps metaphor for many things in life, related to our own life and our position in today's society and so on. And primarily, film is about love, love between two human beings, love for your country, culture, and the elements of love in our life, I think, is the main theme of Dekha. But I really didn't know how to say about my film and how I looked into the story. Uh, I can tell you a very interesting anecdote, which is very sad also because I lost my father just after my outdoor shoot. In fact, the day we were leaving for the outdoor shoot, my father was not well at all. He asked my assistant, "Are you going to North Bengal for the shooting?" What's the name of my son's film? He said Dekha. Dekha means, then what kind of Dekha? Looking back or looking forward? I think he had given the right answer. Perhaps this is both, looking back and looking forward, in my own life and life of our friends, acquaintances, and so on.
You have written the story, the screenplay yourself. What inspired you to write such a story?
Well, there are many sources of inspirations. Uh, I've been toying with the idea of making a film about our own milieu, the milieu where I belong, middle class, upper middle class milieu, and also uh, the certain things we have seen in the 70s, a kind of feelings we nurtured, a kind of faith we believed in, and in today's world, the change in our human values, the value system. And also, I thought of making a film about feelings only, not a very straight story or a very strong narrative. Of course, I don't believe in those kind of jargon, narrative, non-narrative. In cinema, you can combine both. So perhaps here I tried to combine both narrative and non-narrative structure. And inspiration, as I said, it came from various sources, from my own parents, from friends, from my favorite city, Calcutta, from my own culture of Bengal, and like that.
So, you were talking about an age that has gone by, a faith that is lost. Is that what you're talking about in the film?
Not actually, there are passages in the film where you can get the impression of 70s and 80s, and the changes took place in this last 2 3 decades. So I'm not very nostalgic about the age. It comes and it goes. What exactly happens in our memory? And here, as I said, that I've used this sight and sightlessness as a metaphor, and my main protagonist, Shoshibhushan Shannal, is a blind person. Of course, he has become blind, say 17, 18 years ago, because of glaucoma. It's a disease where slowly you lose eyesight. Exactly, it has happened with my protagonist. So he has seen the world. It's very vivid in his memories. the world he had seen, say, 20 years back. Then he meets another person eventually in the film, in the story, a born blind person who had never seen the world. So he has no images. The images are so abstract for him, but he has all human feelings. So it's a very interesting interaction between my protagonist and the young boy, who is a young born blind boy who came from Bangladesh during the Babri Masjid riot. You know, it happened unfortunately all over the subcontinent. A masjid was demolished, and so many people suffered for that. So my blind young blind boy also came from Rangpur district and settled in North Bengal. And in North Bengal, my protagonist meets him, and a new situation crops up, a new feelings about this two blind person. But there are many other characters in the orbit. They're moving in the orbit of my protagonist. So blind man enters into the orbit and starts moving, moving uh, with the gravitation, in the gravitation of, or that forces, which draws all the characters to Shoshibusho, to my protagonist. So film has primarily all the elements of life: love, hatred, jealousy, passion, compassion. All these elements are there.
You, you want to say something?
Yeah, please, please.
So you wanted to, you sort of spoke about love between two human beings. Why just two if there are so many in the orbit?
No, of course, it's not two. It's between human beings in a way. You're right. You know, it's not between two human beings, between human beings. But also, I feel that sometimes the relationship breaks, but it never breaks forever. It remains in your mind, in your memory. So all relationships are very relative in a way. You know, sometimes we call them relationships, sometimes we call them, no, it's not relationship at all. Relationship was a little bit false, it's not true. But it depends, you know, how you look into the things, or look into the character, how you interpret them. And in a way, it's very subjective. Perhaps I don't know, you know, the way I have thought, I have looked into my characters or my situation. Many audience will look in a different way, because even viewing is so subjective. So I'm sure that cinema is a kind of medium where there are participation from many quarters. You conceive something, you realize the whole thing through moving images and sound, and finally in the theater, you cannot ignore the judgment of your audience, because they have their own subjective understanding of a character or a situation.
So how do you perceive this film? For whom have you made it this time? Is it for a very niche audience, particular type of audience you imagine, or is it for the consumption of a mass audience?
Well, you know, really don't understand what is really a product for mass consumption. And in cinema, it works in a very strange way. We have seen in the history of cinema many films which apparently didn't have any mass appeal worked very well at box office. And there were many films which apparently had all the formulas or ingredients of mass appeal failed at the box office. So there is no formula, of course. We sort of try to differentiate between so-called mainstream cinema and the serious cinema. But in my opinion, I try to reach as much as possible. Of course, there is a niche audience, because, you know, the film is not very simple. You know, it is a very complex film. But I don't know. I keep my fingers crossed that at the box office, I'm waiting for that terrible moment. It's like delivering a baby. You know, I think this film took almost 10 months to get ready. So it's like delivering a baby. I'm just waiting for that day. Of course, I've delivered the baby. Now the baby will be greeted, or maybe baptized by my audience. So let's see. Of course, I'm not very particular about audience. I try to make films for theater. Sometimes you get a niche audience, sometimes you get a very large audience. I never thought that Antujuli Yatra would do so well at box office because it was a so difficult film. But somehow that black humor worked in the audience. In fact, after seeing the preview, Satyajit Ray told me, Gautam, if that black humor works, your film would run. So,
So, in this film, do you think there is a bit of your alter ego in anybody in particular?
well, I tell you, the characters, what you see in these films, or when you will watch the film, our characters are very known to me, or a segment of them are little, who are really known to me. But in my personal opinion, that a filmmaker or a writer reflects many characters in his creation. In this, it's not the question of an alter ego, but you will find me not only in the male characters, also in the female characters. I believe in, because when I try to write down something, from my own experience or from the experience of an author, try to combine all my own feelings in different characters. So it has been distributed, my own feelings and reflection of my own understanding or my own experience in different characters. So it's a great joy when you look at your work and find the reflection of those moments in different characters.
So, tell me, when you write, are you an author or a writer? Do the characters dictate, or do you?
No, character. It's not that. It has many different ways. In some film, of course, the situation is so strong, which guides you or guides your emotion to write something for the film. In some case, a strong story, a published story or a novel inspires you, and then you add your own experience and emotion to those characters. So it's not a question of who dictates whom, it's a question of assimilation. And if you can assimilate well through your camera, sound, editing, and all the ingredients of cinema, the final products become effective.
You have a very interesting female character in the film who has a son and who lives with these two blind people. So, how do you see her?
Well, I first of all, I have seen this kind of woman character, the girls in my life, who were deserted by their husband, or somehow the relationship broke, and brought up their own children for many years, and also had another relationship. But in this character of Sharuma, I'm trying to combine what you see in your real life and also a little bit of fantasy of about woman. I don't like that kind of pity that that girl, of course, so unfortunate, got divorced or separated by her husband. But here, my character Sharma is very strong, yet she's very feminist. Very feminist because she's a female. That kind of softness is always there in her, and she's concerned about many people, and she's also concerned about her ex-husband when he comes back and says that forgive me. She's very angry and upset, but in her own mind, own soul, she's thinking, my God, what will happen to him? I'm sure that he's now so devastated. Maybe one day my son will ask about the father, and what will be my answer? So she's full of contradiction. She lives in contradiction. So I like this kind of character, the female who has a sympathy for other characters, not selfish so much, which is in a way the attitude of this market economy, that you become selfish, don't bother for others, you think of yourselves and your own career and your own life. No, for me, my character is different. She's very modern. If you call the modern people are different from ancient people, it's not that. Modern means in today's time, of course. She's the girl of today, but yet she has certain values which I feel is very important for our society.
So, how do you describe this modern woman? What are the qualities of today's woman?
Well, today's woman, in our country, you find there are so many races, classes, and people live in the country or in the villages. Now, of course, in the media, you see the millennium woman means that who lives almost in the cyber age with that kind of sensibility. No, of course, this in the urban situation, uh, the millennium woman should be very forward, updated. But you go to the villages, I have found some very strong women. They are no way worse than this so called millennium woman. I can tell you a story of two girls. They live in Sundarban. The father is paralytic and can't do any work, and they have taken up a dangerous job of carrying corpses from remote Sundarban to the morgue at Diamond Harbour. And they're so daring, they do the job, taking all sorts of risks. They carry corpses, and once I met that girl and asked him, "You don't want to get married?" "No, I'll never get married." Most of the corpses are of women. Either they commit suicide, or they were killed, or they were burnt. But these two women, I call them the greatest millennium women. They don't care. So it depends, in our society is so large and so varied. And really, we don't understand our society unless we look into the real people. Actually, in today's world, what is happening, so-called literate section, they are getting estranged from the subaltern world, because subaltern world is totally ignored in today's society. But I'm fascinated about those people, tribals, non-tribals, people who live on the fringe area. They are fascinating.